If you're hearing this intro, it means you're listening to a modified version of this episode of The Rob Burgess Show. After I uploaded this episode with returning guest Sean Spicer to YouTube, it received 11 copyright infringement notifications. The version you're hearing now is the same episode, but with the music from the original version removed. If you visit tinyurl.com/The Rob Burgess Show unedited, I will make sure to have a copy of this episode in its original form posted there so you can hear it as originally intended. If you feel the need to keep listening to this version, though, go right ahead. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/The Rob Burgess Show. Over 250,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Hello and welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I'm of course your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 23rd episode, our returning guest is Sean Spicer. But before we get to that, I need to take a moment to tell you about our sponsor. For you, the listeners of the Rob Burgess Show podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. A book which pertains to this episode is Democracy of Sound, Music Piracy and the Remaking of American Copyright in the 20th Century by Alex Cummings. Whatever book you pick, you can exchange it at any time, you can cancel at any time, and the books are yours to keep. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/The Rob Burgess Show. Again, that's audibletrial.com/The Rob Burgess Show for your free audiobook. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review everywhere the podcast is available. Whether it's iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Facebook, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, or RSS, you can find links to everything on the official website, www.therobburgessshow.com. You can also find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. Back to today's show. You first heard Sean Spicer on the very first episode of this podcast. Sean has traveled tens of thousands of miles by heel, thumbs, wheels, and wit. By the time he was 30 years old, he had hiked the length of South Korea, hitchhiked across America, and somehow, along the way, managed to serve with the 101st Airborne Division and study philosophy at UC Berkeley. Driven by an intense need to redefine the impossible as well as himself, he now resides in his home state of California and is slowly teaching his son how to road trip. 10 years ago, he began a long walk, which is chronicled in his new book, Guerrilla Camping. You can find out more at his website, guerrillacamping.net. That's GUERRILLACAMPING.net. You can find the book on Amazon at tinyurl.com/H58Q9KO. Those are all lowercase letters, by the way. A quick programming note. On this episode, Sean was kind enough to grace us with some of his mashup creations, so you'll hear a few of his songs played throughout the episode. You can find him on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/DJS4, and that's the number 4. And those are lowercase letters as well. And now on to the show.
All right, so I suppose we can begin.
Okay. Well, welcome back to the Rob Burgess Show, Sean Spicer.
Good to be back, all these lost episodes.
Or should
people are going to be curious about it in 50 years.
That's right. Or should I say tonight, DJ S4?
Yeah, one of my many, many nomenclatures. One that's actually been bandied about recently is the nomenclature Hag Cell. I don't know if you're aware that DEF CON just ended in Las Vegas. Oh, do you know what DEF CON is?
No, but I was just agreeing for the moment.
Okay. DEF CON is a computer security conference.
Okay.
That goes on every year in Vegas. The last time I was there was in 1992 or 1993. I still have a number of friends and professional associates who make the journey out there every year. This year I had a number of friends that were going out there for the first time, who all seemed to think that I would still be in touch with everyone, and I'm not. But a lot of very interesting things come out of there. So it's a hacker conference, which is kind of where I came in backwards into music. So back in 91, there was a technology called mod trackers that allowed you to do very weird things with sound cards on a computer. And at the time, I was running a BBS that kind of catered to the computer underground. And one of the people who was on the BBS, he and I hung out in social circles as well. And he was very into electronic music, which at the time was just called pretty much underground. I don't even know if the term techno was being used yet. It was still just kind of under this broad banner of electronic music. So the difference between what would become acid bass and the work that had been done by Laurie Anderson in the 70s and Kraftwerk was all kind of lumped together as electronic music. And I got involved doing mod trackers. Back then, computers didn't have the storage nor the sound capabilities to really store music. The compression format for MP3s was still another 8 years away. So sampling on a computer was prohibitive. You could use a computer to control a sampler. So Fatboy Slim used an Amiga that actually triggered external hardware samplers. And an Amiga is a computer from the mid-'80s. And so coming out of the computer underground into the electronic music underground really gave me kind of a pirate's perspective on music. It was what you could get away with. So have you heard anything about what's been going on with De La Soul?
Lately?
Yep.
No, I have not heard anything lately from De La Soul.
One of the reasons why you haven't heard anything lately from De La Soul is that De La Soul has never had an album available for digital download or streaming.
Well, that's because of the sampling, clearance rights, I'm sure, right, with Prince Paul and all that, with the heavy sampling on the, 3 Feet High and Rising.
Right, well, actually on all their albums.
Well, yeah.
But at issue is the fact that all of those samples were cleared for De La Soul's recordings on tape, album, and CD. And there's another phrase that should have been in those contracts that is, and other methods as yet undiscovered.
Right, because how could they anticipate what was going to happen? So.
Right. And so what Warner Brothers Music is saying, or not saying, but hinting at, is that they are concerned that the original rights holders of those samples will come back knowing the success of De La Soul and demand something that would be akin to what happened with Paul's Boutique, which is, for a long time, Paul's Boutique was out of print because it was something like 120% royalties that needed to be paid in order to clear the samples for sale. So they would have to pay 20 cents on every dollar they made in order to pay for the samples that were on the album. And the way that record labels were getting around that was to acquire the labels that own the copyrights. And that's what eventually allowed Paul's Boutique to be re-released.
Wow.
Was eventually enough record labels were owned that it was no longer a negative sum game in order to put that album out.
Yay, capitalism.
Yes. So, De La Soul suddenly popped up on my social networks and through, I believe it was the email list for Humble Bundle. They just popped up out of nowhere about a year or two ago and said, hey, we're giving away our entire back catalog. Go here, put in your email address, and you can download it. And 3 months later, they announced a Kickstarter campaign. And they raised $20,000 in the first 8 hours, finished up somewhere around $60,000, and they're coming out anywhere in the next weeks to months. Mm-hmm. But it's pretty imminent. Prince Paul's working on it, Old Talent, but this time they've actually gone and produced their own music, mm-hmm. and then gone back and sampled it. Mm-hmm. So to get back into that pirate nature that I had approaching electronic music, I started DJing in, early 95, late 94. I had been doing some stuff on computer, mod tracking. I'd played in punk bands, which again has that very strong pirate and DIY ethic to it. Mm-hmm. And I started DJing with a bunch of guys that I was in the Army with. And it was, one of us had a record player, somebody else had a mixer from Radio Shack, somebody else had another record player. We all had CD players. And we would figure out, none of this was DJ quality equipment. Mm-hmm. We would figure out how to get all of this stuff working together and how to get things enough on beat that we could play. Mm-hmm. And there were 5 or 6 of us that all kind of played together. And I certainly was not the most talented at the time. But thankfully, at that time, a lot of electronic music, actually today, a lot of electronic music, if you spin within a certain genre, everything sits at the same beats per minute. Mm-hmm. So you really don't have a whole lot of adjusting to do. You just have to make sure you hit the beats on top of each other before you fade them in. Mm-hmm. And trying to think when I first started going kind of cross-genre. For a while, I spent kind of what was called acid bass. At the time, it was all just techno. Mm-hmm. But I was very into acid bass. But at the same time, I was into 60s psychedelia. So it wasn't uncommon for me to throw just a riff, because I didn't have any ability to loop. I didn't have turntables I could juggle with. I would just throw a riff off of some obscure, weird record that I'd picked up downtown. Mm-hmm. Once I was in San Francisco, I was getting more and more into backpack hip-hop. So the underground hip-hop of the late 90s, the early aughts. Mm-hmm. And I started producing, and I was producing sample-based. And I put up a Craigslist ad or something. I met one guy, Rel, who went by Cesar Bajor, at a BART station. Mm. And he just started talking to me because I was bobbing my head and I had big headphones on. And I gathered a menagerie of 4 or 5 guys that I was doing production with. And we went out and we played our first live show. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting behind a computer, doing nothing. I was hitting play because everything was so orchestrated. And I'm like, I can't do this. So I went back to that kind of 94 reality of what can I get cheap? What can I do this live with? And I started sampling, and I started sampling live. I started a nightclub night called Composition, named after the composition books, which for me is just the ultimate icon of creativity. Here's just this blank slate you can get for $1 at Big Lots and pour your soul out into. You can write comic books. You can write stories. You can actually write music in them. You can fold paper airplanes, I guess, if you want, origami. But the flyers were all modeled after the front cover of the composition book. And the idea was to bring electronic producers together in a place where it was safe to just come in and hit play. Mm-hmm. So you come in with a CD player or a CD, drop it into a deck in this nightclub, have a glorious sound system to hear your work on, and get to meet other people who did it, because there really wasn't a open mic kind of environment that electronic music producers could come, share their work, and meet each other. Mm-hmm. And his name escapes me. started with a T, but one night this guy comes in, and he had an ego a mile wide, which was actually kind of deserved. He was good. But really, it was kind of an egoless space. So this guy coming in like, I'm a rock star, was kind of like, okay. One day he comes in with this guy, Mike, and he's like, yo, where do I plug in my microphone? And I'm like, I can do that. Here, we'll just plug it in right here, the mixer. We'll get you up there. And all of a sudden, this guy's playing his electronic production, and this guy, Mike, is rapping over the top of it. Within 4 months, Composition was known as the place where San Francisco MCs could connect with electronic and sample-based producers and come and freestyle over a never-ending concert of tracks. And from there, a number of us got together, and the record label Paraffin was formed. Only one album came out of that, a couple singles. But suddenly there was a movement. And suddenly I'm playing more live shows. And right around that point, Randy, who I believe you know, who was the general manager of the Cat Club, wanted to put together a night called Rocket. And the idea behind Rocket was all around the Run DMC song Walk This Way. He loved the idea of rock and hip-hop hitting each other. At the time, a remix style that would later be known as mashups was starting to blow up. And I was tasked as one of 2 resident DJs in the back room along with Otterpop, who is somebody you should actually get on the show. She has her PhD in Joy Division, and she teaches in England. She is amazing, and she's currently working on her second book. Her first book was, I believe, called Joy Devotion, which was about the importance of fan culture. And she's currently working on a book on vinyl culture. And I know one of the people she just interviewed was Fat Mike from Mike Records, or from Fat Records. So yeah, she would be a blast to interview, I'm sure.
Sure.
And suddenly I went from being into very obtuse, weird music, like a lot of the stuff coming off of Rhyme Sayers, Anticon, a bunch of really unheard of underground hip-hop labels. And now I'm DJing to hundreds of indie rockers every Saturday night. And I'm tasked with spinning rock and hip-hop at the same time. So I would spin every Saturday night. I'd get paid, and I would spend all Sunday happily wandering the thrift stores and record stores of turn-of-the-century San Francisco. And by turn of the century, I mean that rents were $4,000 for a one-bedroom yet. So they hadn't run off or shut down all of the weird little nooks and crannies of record stores that you'd find on the Lower Haight, on the Southern Fillmore, things like that. So you could just go out all day and dig through crates, spend $100, and walk home with 100 pounds in records. And I would spend all week alternately looking through those records for new break beats, new samples for the production work I was doing, and for stuff that I could play on Saturday nights to this very pop crowd. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me musically, because I've never had, pardon my language, I've never given a fuck about pop sensibility. If it's really popular, I might like it in 10 years when I rediscover it. If it's on the top 40, I'm probably annoyed that I have to listen to the radio in my car. So being forced to keep up with, like, what is on the forefront of indie rock, or, indie rock was what alternative rock became, nonsense labels, and hip-hop. And this was, the whole the second coming of Jay-Z, Chingy, the Yin Yang Twins.
Sure.
Pretty mindless stuff, but really rockin' beats. But I was also able to draw on hip-hop from 78 on. Mm-hmm. And my only focus was to rock the dance floor. And one of the things I would do during the week while I was working on doing production for various MCs and whatnot, doing recordings, I would try to put together remixes. They weren't called mashups yet. Mm-hmm. Remixes that were rock and hip-hop. One of which you've heard, which was a contentious one, which was Sweet Home Country Grammar.
I love it.
Yes, which was a mashup of Sweet Home Alabama and Nelly's Country Grammar.
Works perfectly.
The idea came to me. So I was putting together an album that would become known as the Rocket Mixes. And the Rocket Mixes was my sarcastic reprieve from having to play this pop nonsense. Was if you listen closely to the Rocket Mixes, I'm making fun of every song on there in one way or another, or I'm turning it into an ironic counterstatement. So the juxtaposition of Country Grammar and Sweet Home Alabama, which on its front is just two guys really hyping up how cool it is to live in the South and how much they love the South. But one of them is, as you have said, and I don't entirely agree, but a racist anthem.
This is a personal crusade that I am really alone in the world, because everyone loves that song. So it's kind of hard to tell people, but see, they're commenting on Neil Young's Southern Man, and they're really just defending their own racism and stuff, because it's listen to what they say here, and at the end of the day, it's it's a good song, you know what I mean?
The whole line. In Birmingham, they love the governor.
Boo,
we all did what we could do. Mm-hmm. And that was it. They weren't saying that they backed the governor. They were saying they really didn't love the governor. It's these guys in Birmingham. Well, we're not from Birmingham. We're a bunch of rockers with long hair. Mm-hmm. We get hassled down here too, but this is our home and we love it. Mm-hmm. And the whole line about Neil Young is a Southern man, the song Neil Young sang, a Southern man doesn't need him around. Okay, dude, whatever, sing your song. We don't care. This is our place. I mean, it was a yeehaw party anthem. Which, so was Country Grammar.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because I was just listening to the Country Grammar the other day, and I was remembering in high school, and of course I went to high school in Southern Indiana, and we got so excited that, first of all, Midwest rap was just coming up. It was there had been Bone Thugs, yes, there had been, this and that, but in a major way, you mentioned Chingy. That was also another St. Louis rapper. We had Nelly. We had Eminem, of course, around the same time. You could just, the list goes on, and there was all these every region got its little turn, in the spotlight, and finally, the Midwest was finally getting some attention, in high school. And I remember when people would listen to Country Grammar, when that beat stops for a second, he's like, back up to Indiana, and people were like, yeah. Yep. But I realized in retrospect what he was actually talking about is that because the line preceding that is all my folks up in the slammer from whatever up to Indiana. Indiana is the home of several federal correctional facilities, including Pendleton, where Mike Tyson was. It's it's not a great thing to be known for necessarily in some ways, but it was exciting. Same way it was exciting during Ludacris's area codes when he said 317, and that's Indianapolis's area code.
Coming up as a California boy. I had hip hop from the beginning. I mean, I didn't have it in the New York days, but I mean, I was still shitting my diapers. But that was around when I kind of discovered hip hop. But I always had local hip hop, and so that I don't know. I wouldn't call it a diaspora, but talking about Midwest hip hop, are you familiar with Rhymesayers?
Well, of course.
Out of Minneapolis.
Yeah, of course.
Would you consider them part of that movement?
To a certain degree, although I felt like they were a lot less commercial, maybe, than some of those other rappers I mentioned. Because they, Slug is like the owner of Rhymesayers, or one of them. So it's like it's very much. I feel like it's more of a punk rock DIY thing as opposed to, Eminem and Nelly and Chingy, who kind of just they latched on to an existing. You know what I mean?
Right.
They all signed to major labels or whatever. Rhymesayers is its own entity. I mean, maybe they have some, distribution deal with somebody or whatever, but for the most part, they're pretty independent, right? So that's a little bit different. I would still consider them Midwestern hip hop, but I just don't think of them in the same way, because I don't feel like they.
Right. Well, I mean, another Detroit rapper, 50 Cent. If I recall, he was from Detroit, wasn't he?
No, he's from New York City.
He was from New York? Okay. Because he was discovered by Eminem.
Yes. Or Dr. Dre or whoever. But yes.
It was Eminem who signed him and brought him onto Dre's label.
Yes.
When he's got that line, when you sound like Eminem, you get all the groupie love. But he discovered him from mixtapes.
Oh, yeah. I know. I remember
had he not been signed.
He had an independent hit, How to Rob.
Yep, that's what I was going to bring up. Yep.
And that got him noticed, though, because...
dreams of going home with an R&B bitch, waking up early and stealing all her shit.
No, it was a hilarious song. Yeah.
If I don't get rich off this rap game, I'm just going to be a robber for the rest of my life.
It's hilarious. But it was funny because he got his name out there and then in the aftermath of that, people were like, they were dropping, like, who's this 50 Cent? They were all like, responding to his threats of robbery in the other song. For years after, and I'm sure this is something that has happened before in popular music, but I think one of the biggest examples of our generation was the Biggie Tupac, the East Coast, West Coast thing. And for years after that, it was really accepted that if you want to come up, you start a battle with somebody bigger than you, and you make them say your name. And the source, which I don't even know if it's still in publication, I'm sure it's still a website, which was the Word Up of the late 90s, early 2000s. The source would hype these beefs up. And there'd be some no-name from Podunk, Minnesota, who decided that he was going to drop someone's name on a mixtape. And then there'd be all this beef, and this guy's getting all this coverage. And you keep running with that beef, and somebody who's got a opposing label will pick you up and sign you to carry the beef. And a lot of people were getting signed for that. And I don't know that that's so much the case anymore. I think the internet has softened a lot of that. That people can be discovered. I mean, hell, Justin Bieber had a YouTube channel where he played piano and acted like a girl. And now look at him. He doesn't play piano anymore. He still acts like a girl. And he falls.
See what I did there? I started beef with Justin Bieber. I'm going to be famous in a week.
Or unless he's falling through the trap door on the stage, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if you've listened to it. Designer's song, Panda.
I sure have, yeah.
That happened overnight. Because Kanye picked it up.
Right, because it was on his latest album. Right, he used it.
Yeah. And I'm going to leave the conversation about trap for another day. I'm still trying to decide what I feel about it. I think there are a few songs that are clever, but I just think the raw minimalism of it, it's going to take me some time to digest. After having come up with Cool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, and up through like Black Alicious, where you start having just intense lyrical power, and then abstract artists like Dose One, who could do things with their tongue that were probably pornographic. And now it's yeah, over an incredibly minimal beat produced in Fruity Loops. But at the same time, am I a 40-year-old when the Sex Pistols came out, or the Ramones came out, and going, this music is so simple, and it's kind of off-tuned. Do they even know what they're doing? And I think one of the reasons why you're seeing the increase of, or the reduction of complexity in hip-hop is the problems involved in sampling. Is you can't take the complexity of sampling anymore, particularly as a DIY upstart artist, and go, oh, I'm going to throw a track on top of this old breakbeat. But thankfully, you've got things like SoundCloud, Beatbox, a bunch of places where you can go, find producers, listen to their tracks, buy their tracks, get exclusive rights for their tracks for, a couple $100, and put that shit on your mixtape. No clearances, no paying lawyers, no winding up 30 years down the line unable to release any of your back albums because Warner Records is refusing to play with it. So I think part of it is a response to that. And it's also the DIY ethic that for next to nothing, you can get music production software, put this stuff together on a $200 laptop, record it with a $50 mic, and get it out there. I just think the stuff that's making it on the radio is not of the quality it could be. And I'm not spending enough time really digging deep to find out who's really good out there. Whenever the threads pop up on Reddit or on the Facebook hip-hop groups that I'm part of, where, oh, check out so-and-so, he's hype, oh my God, he's great. Like, no, you're somebody who grew up with Drake. You aren't allowed to say that somebody's great. Like, you just don't know what great is yet. And I'm also not hearing the politics in hip-hop. So to take it back to some of those mixes that I was dropping, you've got 600 indie rock kids dancing around in the back room of a club. I mean, what is the ultimate white person song? Africa by Toto. I miss the rains down in Africa. What's the ultimate anti-white person song? I'm an African by Dead Prez.
Also, the Peter Tosh song, You Are African. I still rock with that one, but not when I'm with other people.
Ooh.
I definitely rock that one alone.
Well, times have changed, and I don't have a CD swapper in my car anymore. I've got a thumb drive. But I will say this, I have had Dead Prez in my car since the first day I got the new stereo system put in.
Wow.
I still love them. I don't care if they beat me up. They say some very relevant things. Their song Wolves, I play usually once or twice a month. It's just something that needs to be called out. And when I say play once or twice a month, I'm talking about playing it at my current DJ residency at Last Call. But to take it back on that Toto Dead Prez tip, I went and let everybody imagine their little boat shoes and everything else, listening to Toto, Missing the Rains Down in Africa, and I dropped Dead Prez over the top of it, and the beat fit, and the lyrics fit. And that was another one of those juxtaposed mashups where one song was talking smack about another. But yeah, taking two songs that are wildly divergent was a game to me. And so I got back into DJing right around Cinco de Mayo was my first night DJing out.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I'd had the new DJ decks for, I think, 3 weeks. Talked to one of the guys at the local dive bar. Hey, can I DJ on Thursdays? Yeah, sure, okay. And so I went from there. I'm honestly having more fun DJing at home than I am out, because I've been trained by DJing in San Francisco and actually making a living off it, that your success lies in filling bars and filling dance floors. So if people aren't dancing, you're not winning. And where I'm at now, what's starting to happen is something akin to back in those composition days. So you haven't been to my neighborhood. I live in Talmadge, which is right next to a little tiny area called Colina del Sol, also just broadly called City Heights. And it's a 3 or 4 mile stretch of El Cajon Boulevard that has, from the time I was a child, this area has never cleaned up. Right next to the bar are dueling hooker hotels, both owned by the same family, that offer hourly rates, with bus stops in front of each of them with lots of scantily clad ladies that are obviously going downtown to go to a party. They're not waiting there to get picked up. But it's a sketchy neighborhood. A lot of PCP, a lot of dope, a little bit of gang violence, a little bit of robbery, nothing that's going to faze somebody who grew up in East County, LA in the early 90s. But it's a hood vibe. And I know one thing about living in the hood. The more people you know and the more people know you, the safer and safer and safer it gets. And so I made it a point when I moved to the neighborhood, I'm going to know everybody. And everybody's going to know me. So I love this neighborhood. It's warm. It's comforting. There's families. The weird divide we've got, the side of El Cajon Boulevard I live on is a lot of families. The other side is kind of like the Lion King. You don't go there. And right there in the middle is where everybody meets. So I go in. I'm DJing at last call, and the dealers, the pimps, the prostitutes, the insane old 70s tweakers come in and say hi. Well, one day, one of my buddies was up in there, and he starts spitting over the music that I'm playing. And for you people who aren't familiar with hip-hop or anything, spitting means that he's rapping. He wasn't literally spitting. This was not a Sex Pistols thing, like, stop the spitting! Please, just anything, stop the spitting! No, it was not one of those situations. He's just standing next to me, and he starts rapping over a break. And I go, oh, yeah? And so I extend the break. I reach into my bag, and I pull out my old Shure SM58, plug it in. Yeah, I got a microphone. Here you go. And he started freestyling. And not every week, but, 2 or 3 times a month, people come in, hey, where's the microphone? Pull out the microphone, throw down some breaks. People rap, people get stuff off their chest. And that's honestly, those are my favorite nights. And what I'm forced to do on those nights is, I've got a good selection of instrumentals after DJing for a while, that everybody does. I've got the ability now with these wonderful high-tech digital decks that I can just sample and loop. So I can take a beat, start out, cut it out into 8 measures, loop it, and keep that going. But, I really like the bass line off of Seven Nation Army by White Stripes. And so I drop that bass line over the top, and I'm looping that as well. So now I've got the drums from song 1, got the bass line from song 2, and I've got them looped, and then I've got a guy on a microphone blown over the top. I'm able to cross out that bass line, and I'm able to bring in the synth line from, let's say Joe Jackson. and now there's more of the synth bass stepping out. And the guys are flowing over it. Mm-hmm. Now, what's funny is the younger kids that come in, they want a song they know. And they get really frustrated and can't flow over the top of it if they don't know the song. And it's strange because every time I've ever been involved in freestyling, you don't even need a beat. You just need somebody to beatbox. I mean, just anything. Give it a beat. Battle rappers, in a lot of cases, when they're throwing ciphers and they're in battles, a lot of time there's no beat anymore, which gives you a lot more flexibility. You're not forced to hit every note. It's not like the Blaze battles of the late 90s. But I really appreciate kind of seeing a neighborhood come together around it. And see kind of a cultivation of talent. That somebody's like, yo, let me bring my cousin through here. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest impediments is the fact that I'm always DJing in bars. Composition was in a nightclub on a empty, dead, I believe it was a Tuesday night. The kids under the age of 21 can't come out. And I wish there was a easier way to set these things up where they had, I don't even want to call a bar having a cool factor per se, but having it be nightlife, but community center at the same time. And have it be a place where everybody can get stuff off their chest, but at the same time, a place where people are having a good time and people are partying. And every time I've gone to community centers, it's a weird mix of like, the guys playing pool on the old donated pool table, some kids playing kickball, and it's not a real musically oriented place. And I know there are programs out there that introduce kids to music production and things like that, but it loses that DIY feel. And the whole point of composition was to get these producers out of the bedroom. Right. And get them out there doing stuff. And yeah, I'd like to see more of a community bent on that.
Well, it's one thing
but I don't know how.
Yeah, it's one thing to just, be by yourself, but like you were saying, it's another thing to move the crowd, which is your main goal in public,
Right. Yeah, which is the whole reason why I still DJ on Thursday nights, is so that I can go out and play stuff, and kind of get some feedback. So when I started DJing at Last Call, I didn't know the crowd. It was a new place. God, the first 2 weeks were terrible because I couldn't hear what I was actually playing. There was one point where I had one of my channels turned down, and I didn't notice. And there were two girls dancing at the bar. And the reason I didn't notice is you play out of your headphones on your shoulders, so you can hear the snare hits when you're mixing. And one song ended, and I had faded out of it, and my headphones were loud enough that I didn't notice that there was no sound coming out of the crappy sound system there. There were two girls at the bar dancing, and when I realized about 2 or 3 bars in that there was no sound coming out of the sound system, I had to call them out and go, "Do you girls know you're dancing in my headphones? You gotta say something." And they hadn't noticed.
That's hilarious.
So where I was standing, my headphones were as loud as the house system. Which isn't the case. I've now figured out sound system, and it's perfectly suitable. But when I first started DJing there, in order to understand the crowd and understand what people liked, I had an unused notebook that I'd gotten as swag from a trade show. And you always have a notebook as a DJ to like write down songs, like transitions that work well that you want to work on. So I just told people, because they're used to this internet DJ thing where somebody's paying for a service or they're DJing off of Spotify and they have every song. And I had to explain to people, I'm like, okay, first off, I'm not an internet DJ. I lied. I said I didn't have internet connected to my computer. I did. But I'm not going to play a song I haven't heard before or that I haven't listened to before. So I'm trying to think of a good example of a song I've heard many times but I've never sat down and listened to. And, of course, everything that comes to mind off the top of my head is something that I have recently sat down and listened to. But one of the songs that came up was Kevin Gates, Two Phones. I got two phones, which not really my favorite song. But I just started handing people this orange book and going, write your requests in here. I'll listen to them this week, and I'll play them next week. And people took that the wrong way. I no longer pull out the orange book, as it was called, for people to write in, because people would write 3 and 4 pages of requests. They don't understand that I can't listen to 3 or 4 pages of songs in a week. They think I can download them and then I just hit play.
Right.
But as you hear, I layer things. And I like to pull one song over another, over another, over another. But the next week, I came back and I played, I believe it was 8 songs in 12 minutes. And suddenly people got it. And that's what we've got here. So, interestingly, I surprised a lot of people with that mix because I wasn't familiar with some of these songs. So, one of those songs was Butterfly by Crazy Town. I had somehow managed to never, ever, ever hear that song.
Really? How did that happen?
Like I said, if it was on the radio, I was probably pissed off because I didn't have a CD player. So I didn't listen to a lot of radio. I didn't have MTV. When that song came out, I was very much into underground hip-hop and underground electronic music. I wasn't looking to MTV to set my taste. If I was going out to nightclubs, I was going out to nightclubs that played industrial music or hip-hop. So I completely missed that song, which meant when I went to go look for it, my go-to source, I'm not going to share it because I don't want it to get shut down, is a community of people that share underground music, weird remixes, stuff that you're not going to be able to buy after the initial 500 copies of the album are gone. And that's where that remix of Butterfly came from. Not only was it a remix, it was a remix nobody had ever heard. And it was a remix that bloody made the song good. And it wasn't until I was doing some research, because I like to know something about the music I'm spinning, that it was rated as one of the worst songs of all time. And I'm like, really? I like that remix. It's not bad. And then I watched the YouTube video for the original version of the song. And good God, if I'd seen that first, I would have thrown the book at the guy who wrote it down. Because it was terrible. But somebody was able to come in a few years after the fact and do an amazing remix of it.
But you know that the beat to that song is lifted directly from a Red Hot Chili Peppers song.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and the video very much looks like it was directed by the same person that did, Behind the Sun? Terrible 90s psychedelics. Yes, when everybody had a Pyrex bong with an alien sticker on it. And they probably had a Cat in the Hat.
Oh my.
So by them putting their requests in the book and me not spinning off, what's the commercial version on Spotify, I was able to come with something new. And at the same time, play the requests. Now, meanwhile, my buddy BJ, shout out to BJ Disbera, CVBJ, who is going to be doing a California tour coming up here soon. Live music matters, as he says. I'm really disgusted with everybody co-opting the Matters movement because Black Lives Matter, and I don't think anybody riding on the back of that is really paying close enough attention. He decided that he was going to come up with a bunch of requests that I couldn't possibly DJ. And the first one he put on the list was a hidden track off of one of Blink-182's album. Wanna Fuck a Dog. And the first time I heard this song, BJ was playing it. He does acoustic covers. And a bunch of Navy guys are at the bar singing along, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know BJ was this popular. I had no idea that it was a Blink-182 song. Well, not only did I play Fuck a Dog, I learned every break and every bar cut in Fuck a Dog. And it became a battle cry while I was DJing. That somebody at the bar would go, Spicer, fuck a dog! And I would drop this track over whatever was playing. And would never have thought of doing that if it hadn't been for this orange book of requests, which was a great way to bring the community into the music. He requested the Cantina Band by Star Wars, which you heard in that mix. But he didn't specify that it had to be from the Star Wars movie. That's why what you hear is the disco version of the Star Wars melody from, I believe, 1979.
Nice.
But he also requested some things that did not make it into that mix that were just almost completely impossible to spin, such as One with the Underdog by Terror. The only way I figured out how to mix that is to just take, because it's just fast grinding metal. But another one that he requested, this was, like I said, Cinco de Mayo. So before the launch of Pokemon Go, he wanted the Pokemon theme. And, okay, well, let's see what I can find. Well, like I said, I work with this community of people who specialize in very hard-to-find music. And I found this cover of the Pokemon theme by Dr. Darren Banter, which I'm not going to go so far as to say that it's like the Nick Cave version of Pokemon, but somewhere in that realm. Yeah, another gentleman, my friend Andy, does really interesting and elaborate, I don't want to call it puppetry. He does stage and set design and theatrical designs. Does great stuff. He's been doing a Halloween block party every year for, I believe, the last decade. And one of the things he's got is an actual, like, smoke-breathing dragon. He grabbed the book, and he decided that what he was going to throw at me was just tons and tons and tons of really obscure music. And what surprised him was I knew a lot of it. But what he also threw was a whole bunch of cartoon covers. And, wow, that's weird. The weirder part was Ryan actually had those CDs. But one of the songs he requested, he just put down, he requested, it was by Giants. What was it? Was They Might Be Giants. And it was one of my favorite songs from my Army years, Birdhouse in Your Soul.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
Probably one of their most popular songs ever. Well, I take liberties, and being a huge They Might Be Giants fan, I actually had a techno cover of SEXXY, which I believe was off their Factory Showroom album. But again, it's one of those weird songs that just really didn't make it into rotations.
Mm.
So I guess to ended up talking about that juxtaposition of songs. I've always been a huge fan of positive hip-hop.
Mm.
So political hip-hop that exposes, like, the wrongs of society, that talk about the realities of what's going on, the black people's CNN, the urban CNN.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was back there in San Francisco DJing popular music, one of the unfortunately very popular songs was Project Chick. And at the time, an album had just dropped, or a 3-album set called 69 Love Songs.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I heard Project Chick, I was part of a number of record pools, so I was getting free 12-inch singles given to me every 2 weeks by various record labels. I got Project Chick thrown at me. And my first thought when I put it on, I had been listening to the Magnetic Fields, and I thought, how fucking romantic. And this came out of it. Yeah, so basically I just like to play and play with music. Music was my first love, and I joked that I'm a kind of insane dancer, and people used to always ask me, like, where'd you learn to dance so well? And I'd say, well, music's my first love. Dancing is the closest I can come to making love to it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I used more crass terms in my youth, but DJing and remixing is as close as I can come to having children. I think you may have heard me play guitar once.
Mm-hmm.
It's an abomination. So I don't want to spread those genes into the pool. I'm content mixing music and making statements.
Right.
And playing with what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing if you can do new and innovative things with it.
Mm-hmm. Do you understand people who are reticent to have their music remixed?
Yes. Absolutely.
So would you not remix someone's songs if you knew that they were against it?
No, I wait for them to send me the cease and desist notice, or actually they send my hosting provider a cease and desist notice. I'm probably the only person who has had over 20 songs removed from MySpace.
Wow.
I have had multiple SoundCloud accounts deleted. I put them together. I mix them. They're not going to come to my club. If they do come to my club, hey, maybe I can make them dance. But I believe that all of my work falls under the banner of fair use. I am making popular culture. And because I'm not making any money off of it, there's nothing for them to come after me on. They can't say that, oh, well, you made $100 off that album, you owe us $125. It's, no, I didn't even make money DJing your music. If anything, go after BMI and ASCAP for the licensing fees from the venues that are paying these license fees and get it from there. But, no, I understand completely people who don't want to have their music remixed.
Mm-hmm.
A really good commentary on this, and I'm going to give you one last song before we close it out for the night, which was actually the lead-in that I did for the Rocket Mixes album.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the good commentaries that I've heard of this was from, I cannot remember the DJ's name, but if you Google Ill Submarine, this brilliant DJ did a mashup album of the Beatles and the Beastie Boys. And in it, they have a sample, and I believe it's Paul McCartney, saying, honestly, I love the bootlegs. Because in 30 or 40 years, when it's time, I can say, no, that's not your music. It's mine. So if Nellie wants to come at me. Hi, Nellie. I know you listen to Rob Burgess' show, so go ahead. Get my phone number from Rob. Give me a call. I'm totally down. We can collabo. I'm down to do a remix with you. Like, if Madonna calls, tell her I'm not at home. Which is another rich story, but I'll leave that for another time. Yeah, if they want to come at me and tell me to stop, that's fine. But it's a little bit like going back to that start beef with somebody big and make them say your name. I'm not big enough that anybody's ever going to say my name. So I appreciate people who don't want their music remixed, but I'm not trying to get the remixes out in Mixmag or anything. I'm a bedroom as a residency at a club with a capacity of 37 people these days. I'm an old man who just likes music. And I am very, very sorry, Rob, if this episode of your podcast gets pulled offline for all of the copyright violations. And on that note, I'm going to leave you with this. A Pirate Nation. It is a combination of Creative Commons licensed music, public domain music where the copyright is lapsed, and a book by Lawrence Lessig that talks about copyright warriors and how music of the 21st century is no longer a creative process, it's a process of hiring lawyers.